If you clicked on this video looking for an IGN 7 out of 10 type review, that's not my goal. And if you're looking for what lore implications this game might have on the Lands Between and the Elden Ring series as a whole, then you should probably just go watch Vati Vidya. What I want to do with this video is emphasize and focus on how Elden Ring Nightreign is FromSoft's best experiment. An experiment with the core mechanics of what makes up a Soulsborne game, evolving all the way from the beginning with Dark Souls 1. From Software, ever since Miyazaki got in charge, has had a formula, the Souls-like genre, a concept that began with Demon Souls but was popularized by Dark Souls 1, characterized by its difficult but usually fair sword and spell combat. This combat involves rolling to get invulnerability frames, or iframes, where you're temporarily invincible to all damage for a short time, as well as stat-based builds that help you do different things more effectively. The formula changed with the experimentation to the stats and iframes with Dark Souls 2. The gameplay of the formula was then practically flipped on its head to be quicker and less stat-focused with Bloodborne. It also replaced the dodge with a dash, and in doing so changed the pace and speed of combat to be lightning quick. And finally, the formula was perfected to the best experience the Dark Souls series had to offer. Dark Souls 3. This game had refined the difficulty and speed of gameplay, being faster than Dark Souls 1 and 2, but slower than Bloodborne. Even way back in the day, FromSoft still experimented with the formula that was established all the way back in Dark Souls 1. Each of these games took a different aspect, be it the combat, the difficulty, or the speed, and made adjustments, enhancing the gameplay, and thus the core design was unique and fresh for every new game. In my mind, this is why these games are considered the best of the best, offering excellent and cohesive games with varied takes on the same basic formula, albeit with varying levels of success. After Dark Souls 3's final DLC launched, From Software kind of faded into the background of the scenery that made up the gaming landscape at the time. For 2 whole years, there was silence. Then, a trailer drops for something called Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which looked phenomenal. This guy's got a sick prosthetic arm, the violins are going crazy, the dash from Bloodborne is back, and there's a lot of parrying, like a dizzying amount of parrying. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, this isn't Dark Souls 4 or Bloodborne 2. Where's the castles? Where's the horror? Was that a grappling hook in my FromSoft game? And yeah, it's pretty sick. And mostly everyone liked it. Mostly. This experimentation with the core elements of the Souls-like game wasn't without its critics. When it came out, the game was too hard and inaccessible. It focused heavily on skill and bosses that didn't, quote, feel fair, and it took the speed from Bloodborne and dialed it up to 11, making it one of the hardest games, if not the hardest game, in From Software's catalog. Even if, in the end, the game was well received, I think this is where major changes to the FromSoft formula started to get more negative pushback from the fans. Ignoring this one. Which leads us to 3 years later with the biggest FromSoft game ever, Elden Ring. Elden Ring is massive. FromSoft returned to a more standard approach to gameplay. In other words, this game played way more like Dark Souls than any other title in their catalog, with the return of dodge rolling and the emphasis on stat-based builds. The game took the comparatively linear maps of the previous games and put the gameplay in the context of a sprawling open world, allowing the player to progress at their own speed by traveling around, collecting gear, and over-leveling for each and every main story boss fight. The game sold over 30 million copies, smashed records, and was loved across the board by basically everybody. Except for a few little grumpy guys who were just a little too grumpy and went in expecting something that the game wasn't trying to offer. This studio loves to experiment. From the hands-off open world structure of Elden Ring to the fast-paced gameplay of Bloodborne, this studio is constantly exploring new ways to make their formula fresh. Which leads us, finally, to Elden Ring Nightreign. This game is a constant test of your ability to think on the go, requiring unbroken, constant attention that goes even beyond Sekiro and Bloodborne. I'm not even just talking about the boss fights. If you go to the wrong place at the start, if you challenge a boss that's just a bit too hard, one crossed wire, one wayward pinch of underestimation,
one hidden twitch, and kablooey!
This kind of continuous on-your-feet thinking throughout the gameplay that makes up a match is made possible only by the force of nature that is the storm. The storm is an ever-constant threat, pushing the player to move from location to location. Unlike some other games that have similar concepts, I think I can safely say, at least in my opinion, that this is the perfect implementation of a gameplay element like this. It's threatening and deadly, and constantly requires that players stay on the move. Like the rest of these games, but something that Nightreign nails perfectly is that the storm is punishing enough to be taken seriously, but not so deadly that you can't take the risk to run in, quickly grab the things you need, and get out without feeling like you're instantly going to die. The scattered graces of this game also help with the reassurance of the risk versus reward of dipping into and out of the storm just to grab one more item. Surely it wouldn't kill me, right? Surely just one more item, just one more item. I just need one more item. The experimental pressure that the storm imposes is phenomenally implemented, and in contrast to their earlier titles, there's really nothing like it to draw comparison to. It creates an incredibly unique sense of tension, which is complemented by the masterfully well-made gameplay. At its core, the gameplay is not too dissimilar from Elden Ring. Dodging is still important, and it adheres to a somewhat weighty combat feel. Mostly. However, the modifications this game makes to the gameplay of Elden Ring make it feel almost completely different. For instance, the movement itself is entirely unique from the rest of the FromSoft catalog. With the removal of fall damage, the additions of wall climbing and a second faster sprint all help this game keep that tense moment to moment without slowing down. Were it just for these changes, the game would still be absolutely phenomenal, but the changes don't stop there. The classes of this game help it to reiterate and evolve the gameplay of some of the best concepts from across FromSoft's catalog. The Duchess can use the dash from Bloodborne and Sekiro, however, expanding further on the mechanic, she can use a second evasive maneuver if the dodge button is pressed twice in quick succession. The Wilder has an evolved version of the grappling hook from Sekiro. You're given essentially free aim with it, making it complement the movement mechanics even further. The Guardian uses shields and can create massive safe areas that boost damage negation in a radius for his teammates. And Iron Eye, who is an American man with a ranged weapon that he can make comically large. And, for the sake of brevity, the next 4 characters get a lightning round. Revenant has summons, Recluse can mix magic, Executor can Sekiro parry, and the Raider specializes in heavy weapons with a part-time in construction. FromSoft's boss fights have often been described as dances that each have their rhythms, tempos, and back and forths, and I think that this is a perfectly apt description in the context of Nightreign. Each of the characters has their own separate rhythms, tempos, and back and forths that make each character new, unique, and interesting. And when you're in the heat of combat, no 2 characters feel or play the same. This class system is like an evolution of the rebirth mechanic in the series past, taking the concept of switching builds and making it more easily accessible to the average player. All of these aspects are good by themselves, but mixed together with the frantic pace of each match makes for an absolute ball of a time. The way this game handles its difficulty is also incredibly unique in comparison to the games that FromSoft has made in the past. Usually in From Software games, it starts out with a challenging first fight. Some of them you're supposed to win. Gundyr and the Cleric Beast are difficult, sure, but you're generally supposed to be able to kill them within a few tries. These fights serve as sort of bars of entry for the rest of the game. If you can beat these challenges in combat, then you'll be able to experience the rest of the game. And then there are the fights that you can win, but you're really not supposed to. The beginning of Sekiro and Elden Ring have these. You still get to the same place that you'd be at if you'd lost, but there are some differences in how you get there. These fights are here to establish stakes. They serve as bars of entry, sure, but they exist to humble you at the beginning of the game, so that when you're looking back on your playthrough, that sense of accomplishment is even more satisfying. In a strange way, the first boss of Nightreign takes it in something of a new direction. You have 2 chances to beat this version of Morgott. For veteran players, this really won't be a big deal. But for new players, Morgott is just difficult enough to be seen as a boss you're supposed to lose at. However, by virtue of giving you a second try, Morgott serves as kind of a middle ground, not fully a boss you're supposed to die at, and not fully a boss that you can easily beat. The design of this early encounter also enforces a message that Nightreign seems to be telling the player. If you die more than twice to a boss, you should probably go get more gear and levels before trying to take them on again. Moving back to the more traditional FromSoft titles, as the games continue, they gradually turn up the heat, with the next areas and major boss fights usually being harder. Usually. Until you get to about the middle to end game point, where they start making their final few bosses range from incredibly difficult to a reasonable challenge. Generally, these games follow the same linear difficulty path. The difficulty for a new player in Elden Ring Nightreign is comparatively kind of all over the place. Points of interest that have challenging bosses, world bosses that might just be a little too difficult if not properly geared, as well as the easy to pick up, hard to master speed of each match can make for a comparatively non-linear difficulty progression. But as you start to play the game more and more, you'll start learning the map, which bosses are in which points of interest, and eventually you'll start to get in the rhythm of this game's melody. You'll start optimizing, adapting to situations, and eventually you'll be able to feel confident in your ability to think on the go. And who knows, you might even be able to salvage the worst runs where the game screws you at literally every turn. Sorry, it's just happened more than once. But that RNG, that randomness, is what gives this game its replayability. It's what helps those high moments feel so high. And, if you get lucky, it's the cherry on top of this entire experience. And just like the other FromSoft games, trial and error is at the very heart of this game, requiring a lot of practice, effort, and experimentation to get a match you're truly satisfied with. Until this guy shows up and spits in your face. Random events. They are both the bane of my existence and also super important to how this game experiments. There are a lot of random events. I'm talking a lot. But the ones I'm highlighting here both have significant downsides for not properly completing them. Namely, the Curse of the Demon and the Locust's Plague. These, by themselves, are not that big of a deal. If you know what you're doing, clearing them solo isn't difficult at all. However, if you have an inexperienced team, they can kinda be tough. They aren't just here to be hurdles you have to clear, though. If their events are completed correctly, they grant the player with some absolutely broken boons that help make the game a lot easier. With the Locust boon randomly granting a metric ton of runes on hit, and the Demon's boon boosting your attack power based on the amount of runes you're currently holding. These two events can add a lot to the overall experience of a run. They're make or break, and while this does help make certain runs easy to look back on with a satisfying sense of accomplishment, they also have equal power to absolutely ruin your run, especially if you or your teammates don't know exactly what to do. This is probably the only thing that I feel somewhat conflicted about when I say this game is FromSoft's best experiment, because it's not like these events are strictly bad. In comparison to the map of the base game, they offer more unique and dynamic moments of gameplay, but it can often feel like a cheap shot, especially if you don't know exactly what to do for each specific event. Hey, editor Swax here. So I said this, I wrote it, I had it all scripted, all planned out, and then I was looking at it and I was like, this doesn't sound right. And then it hit me. This is in keeping with all of Dark Souls. This is in keeping with the FromSoft formula that I talked about previously. Dark Souls is literally built on these kinds of moments, these kinds of things that feel like cheap shots. I mean, look at the entirety of Blighttown. And upon realizing that, I think this is safe to say that this is well within the FromSoft formula. It's just, yet again, in a unique place that caught me off guard when I was going through again and editing. If anything, this is just further reinforcement that this game is an experiment with the formula of their older titles. But getting back on track, finally, after all this time spent in-game learning the map, the movement, and full mastery of your chosen characters, you're ready to face against the greatest challenges this game has to offer. This, in my opinion, is the strongest collection of FromSoft boss fights I've ever seen in one of their games. Visually speaking, they're absolutely stunning, with each boss feeling like love and care was poured into their design. Whether that's the occasional draw-dropping attack, or small character designs, these are some of the best-looking bosses ever. And in keeping with the spirit of the previous games, these bosses' designs and vague descriptions tell us just enough to hook us on the lore for each boss, while still leaving plenty of room for speculation. As for their arenas, these battlegrounds are made up of what appears to be ash. Now, were it just ash, these arenas would be kind of bland. However, FromSoft's ability to combat the potential feeling of monotony is found in the sky. All of the skies found in Nightraign's boss arenas are absolutely stunning, with a few particular ones that stand out. And at this point you might be thinking, sure, the bosses are pretty, but how do they play? Well, each boss has a unique moveset that is spectacularly well designed, being phenomenally well choreographed and backed up with some incredible visual flair to nearly every attack. All of these bosses are ones I feel should be deemed skill check bosses. Their attacks are fair but punishing, and the game rewards you for heavily paying close attention to their moveset. And just like the playable characters, while all bosses require skill, none of them feel the same. The variety here is impressive, and the fact that they were able to make each boss fair but different speaks to the kind of perfection that FromSoft has achieved through their iteration and experimentation of their formula. But the experimentation doesn't stop there. Each of these bosses have different weaknesses to different types of damage, usually stunning the bosses as well as providing a debuff if they're hit with said damage. These weaknesses make you play the game a little bit differently, making you prioritize getting a weapon that deals that damage type before actually facing off against the Night Lord. I also believe that this weakness mechanic is an experimental evolution of the shackle items found in Elden Ring. In that game, you could temporarily stun two different bosses with two different shackles that were found in obscure parts of the map. However, Nightreign streamlines the process by making it a whole damage type instead of just one specific item. Some of these bosses even have bigger experiments inside the fights themselves, the most obvious example being the equilibrious beast, Libra. Libra allows you to enter its arena, but before fighting it, it offers a deal. Each deal comes with downsides and upsides that occur during the fight. Another example is how the Fissure in the Fog fight becomes a Final Fantasy XIV or Monster Hunter raid, requiring players to hide behind cover while a big area of effect attack goes off. These are things you'd never find in older FromSoft titles, and it's this kind of unique take on bosses that makes the Night Lord so interesting, and concurrent with the kind of experimental gameplay offered by Nightreign. Getting to the last few things that have gone through experimentation, let's talk about the map. This is the base map. Some of these structures shift depending on the run, but overall it stays pretty much the same. That is, until the Shifting Earth feature shows up. This gameplay feature switches up the map by adding different points of interest that, much like the weaknesses mentioned earlier, change how you approach the game. Each of these points of interest hold unique bonuses, bosses, and topography that impact the match experience. For example, this crater holds the ability to make your weapons better. This is the only way currently in the game that gives you the ability to upgrade your weapons to Legendary tier. However, actually getting to the forge where you can upgrade your weapons can prove to be a challenge. At the bare minimum, there are 2 bosses that you have to fight, with a few mini-bosses thrown in for good measure. Instead of splitting your time up between day 1 and day 2 collecting gear and getting flasks in order to fight the Night Lord, you might spend the first day doing as much as possible, with a sense of urgency knowing that you'll spend all of day 2 down in the crater. This kind of design is not only true for the crater, but all of these points of interest. Each has a unique bonus to gain, making planning around them sometimes essential. This city is riddled with mini-bosses, but if you get to the center mausoleum and beat the boss, you can come back from the dead a single time in a respawn-restricted zone. This mountain is home to an ancient dragon that guards a buff for frostbite buildup, and this Nazca-looking forest holds a buff for rot buildup. This game, as shown in the previous segments, experiments with various mechanics from the studio's past and innovates, but with this Shifting Earth, the game experiments with itself, taking what, despite the randomized locations, can somewhat be a repetitive map. and switching it up by making it more unique and interesting with each point of interest. And now, the story.
Long, long ago.
I know I said I wouldn't be talking about the lore in this game, however, the game experiments here as well. Each character has a story, or a remembrance. These remembrance quests are accessed through this book here, and their stories take place in instances with unique interactions between the characters.
I have a boon to ask of you.
I see this unique mechanic as an exploration of the invasion or help mechanic from the past. In older FromSoft titles, you could join instances to invade or help NPCs throughout their respective quest lines. But here, all you have to do is load up a remembrance. These also have a variety of different objectives beyond just helping or invading. It isn't too complicated, but there is more variety. Much like the previous games, some of these quests even lead to new endings. However, unlike the previous games, the way that these characters' stories are told is very easy to follow, and in some cases their motivations are very clear from the descriptions of the pages found in the book. Dark Souls, Sekiro, and Bloodborne all told unique stories with their characters, but they weren't as clearly stated or shown like Nightreign. And while this easier-to-follow structure is present, the game still adheres to the core story elements that make a Soulsborne game good. It's no secret that there is one element that ties all of From Software's games together. It isn't the crossovers or the references or even the gameplay. The one element that ties everything together is the emphasis placed on unwavering perseverance. Each of these games present what may at first seem to be an impossible challenge, but if the player tries and tries and tries again without giving up, throwing themselves at this challenge, this wall, eventually they can overcome it. I believe that each of the characters' stories embody this unwavering perseverance in a unique way that the characters in the past didn't. They're each driven by different motives. For example, the Raider seeks a fair challenge while the Recluse is searching for her lost child. But all of these characters know that, despite their own reasons for being here, giving up is not an option. And as such, they must work as a team to overcome the night.
The will to cross the endless night and fight on.
This is the first time in playing a From Software game's story that I didn't feel lonely. This feeling of camaraderie is important to making the game stand out. In previous games, NPCs usually end up dead or betraying you, but here, these characters are with each other till the end. However tragic the end may be, they still stand together. This game's unique speed, story, and mechanics make Elden Ring Nightreign From Software's best experiment. It takes the classic staples of the Soulsborne genre and innovates in bold new ways in keeping with From Software's growing ambition as a studio. That innovation is in the very blood of each of their titles, and Elden Ring Nightreign is just the most unapologetically experimental this company has ever been with its formula. This game wasn't made to usher in a new era of cash grabs, and it wasn't done with the intent to mess with the legacy of the games that came before. Elden Ring Nightreign is From Software's best experiment, because it embodies the drive to innovate through exceptional and thoughtful experimentation. Hey everyone, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my friends who helped me record this video and encouraged me throughout the process. Your support means the absolute world to me, and without it, I don't think I could have made this video, to be honest. There are still things I didn't talk about in the video, like the gacha mechanics, the Everdark Sovereigns, which are sick by the way, and, well, who knows what. I didn't really think that it fit the overall essay of the video. I really do appreciate your support, and if you watched this far, I appreciate you. You don't have to, but liking and subscribing is exceptionally helpful. And, you know, whatever cliche thing that YouTubers say, here's a grav! Yeah, ooh. But with that, I think I'm going to go work on the next video. Hopefully gaps between videos will tighten up a little bit, but no promises. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care of yourself. I'll see you later.